Lively and unrehearsed, we call it Moral Side of the News. Welcome in. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. As always, I'm joined by a distinguished panel. Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ and Molo Village CDC. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We say Happy Jewish New Year to Rabbi Stan Miles of Louisville Melton School. And Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Our first topic. We all say it, just Google it. But the U.S. Department of Justice says not so fast. They opened a landmark antitrust trial against Google with allegations that the company intentionally stifled competition to operate an illegal monopoly. It's one of the largest antitrust trials since the feds took on Microsoft in the 1990s. Panel, we turn to you. The Department of Justice says this case is about the future of the internet and whether Google will ever face meaningful competition. Let's hear your thoughts.
My server works great on my iPhone, on this iPad. I read the material and I'm really at a loss at what's going on, although it is potentially frightening to see what could happen to the whole system if some bad actors or even bad artificial intelligence control them.
I'm going to say, as part of my understanding of capitalism is to exceed and excel in your particular market and to do better than your competition. So, I mean, this is and to want to stifle competition. That doesn't surprise me. At the same time, I was amazed in looking at some of the material that was shared with us about the true amount of money that's involved in that. That they were saying Google's basically its worth is over $1 trillion, and that they can afford to give companies hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that they use only their product. And so that kind of level of any company, I mean, Google's got a higher value than probably 90% of the nations in the world. And to see that much, so much put together, that is a concern, though, to me, and particularly trying to project in the future. But it's not a surprise that anybody's been able to amass that kind of amount of wealth. But it is a worry. And I think it's leading to, as Stan was saying, too, the implications for the future is a scary thing.
I decided to do some research trying to go back to what I could remember about big conglomerations, and went back and remembered Ma Bell. And Ma Bell actually started in 1877 and ended in 1983. It had a monopoly over the US and Canada with assets at that time of $150 billion, equivalent to 420 in 2022. And you know what happened with the breakup of Ma Bell and then became Bell South, now AT&T. And think of all the telephone companies that we have now after that big, massive breakup. And whether or not that's an advantage, but surely it is.
I think this is one of those issues or problems that, unfortunately, most people don't know enough about Google and how its inner workings are. And I am not sure that we as consumers are really interested in whether it's a conglomerate or not, because we're interested in making sure that we're able to function electronically the best way that we can. And most of us use Google and will probably continue to do that. And most businesses will. And so I think this will be a fight that, while it is a legal issue, I'm not sure that the average person is going to be concerned about it.
But I don't use Google. I have a Gmail account, but I don't like using it. So when I go to do, when they want an evaluation after a doctor's visit, they want me to check in on Google. Well, that doesn't work for me. And so my doctors don't get evaluations because I don't use my Gmail account. So I guess it's because I started with Yahoo and I stuck with Yahoo, and that's where I'm staying. I'm not moving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about a cheesy movie comedy from about 60 years ago called The President's Analyst. And it was about the president's analyst. I think it was played by James Coburn. And the big villain in this movie was the phone company. The phone company was the group that caused all of the problems in the country and in the world. And when reading this today, I was thinking, my God, this sounds like the plot of that movie. The only thing I want to get from my search engine is, and I don't know whether I'm asking too much or not, probably am. All I want is when I search for information, I just would like to find the truth.
Oh. Come on, Stan.
As they say, if it's on the internet, it must be true, right?
Well, we also have, as that was excellent example Sally gave about, the telephone system being monopolized. And there was a time when there was a big breakup of oil, Standard Oil, pretty much, So I think sometimes forced breakups do actually, in the long run, benefit. And I do, am concerned, that the more and more is amassed in one information technology and or any ability is amassed more and more in one singular focal point, that also makes everybody much more vulnerable that way as well. And now whether I would choose among the various options out there at this time, what's available, there's only really Google for the most part. It's a default. And I'm also, it's become part of our vocabulary. I don't, even if I was using Yahoo as a search engine, I probably wouldn't say I'm going to go out and do some Yahooing. I do talk about going out and Googling. It's just become such an important part of our cultural experience. But I do worry about anybody who has that much, or any entity that has that much control over human life and human knowledge as well.
Well, we will see. I guess if you want an update on this trial, you just have to Google it and find out for yourself as it moves along.
And it's going to go on and on for, I forget how long they said. I mean, it's going to be months and months and months.
Years and years and years.
Yeah, probably years and years between the appeal process as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also, because of the monopoly, can make us much more vulnerable. Isn't that sort of what you're trying to say?
That's what I'm saying, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All those lawyers hovering around. Wow.
But Bill, as you said, I remember in the 90s, Yahoo was the search engine of choice. And a friend I was working with on a website, in fact, said, "Have you heard of Google?" Yeah. And we switched. All right, we'll move on to our second topic here on Moral Side of the News. We've all heard this expression, know when to say when. And Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney says when is now, as he announced he won't seek re-election to the Senate next year. Quote, "It's time for a new generation to take the reins," end of quote, the 2012 GOP presidential nominee said, accusing Presidents Biden and Trump of not doing enough to address America's challenges. Romney said, "It's time for guys like me to get out of the way." Panel, we turn to you. Is Romney right? And let's hear your thoughts about Mitt Romney.
I think Mitt Romney is a really classy guy. I agree with what he's doing. And it's always nice to leave the stage after a standing ovation near the top. And that's what he's doing. I look at what has happened with Senator McConnell, what has happened with Dianne Feinstein, and I'm sad. I'm really sad because they're struggling for what?
Well, I'm glad to hear that Nancy Pelosi is going to re-up, or at least try to re-up. And I think that there's some sort of hidden agenda behind Romney's decision. And his hidden agenda, my thinking is that he's trying to save his own party. And he feels like this will give him the freedom to speak out and speak up against what's going on and the factions that are taking over his own political party that I'm sure he dearly loves.
My biggest concern in all of this is ageism. All of us are older and I believe wiser. And I am concerned that we are being, in my slang, tossed to the curb because of our age and not because of what we can continue to contribute to our democracy and to society. I do agree that we need younger politicians, but we need younger politicians who are wise and not frivolous. And I think that is what we are seeing and perhaps sacrificing by what Mitt Romney is doing and some of the others. Now, on the other end, I do believe that Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein, if you can't function in your capacity, I think it's time to step aside and step down so that you can be replaced. And just holding on just for the sake of that, I think that is a bad precedent for our democracy. But overall, I'm just concerned about the ageism issue that we are seeing in our country. I feel like I'm older and I have lots to give, and I'm not ready to step aside. But I also believe in mentoring someone younger to walk with me so that when that time comes, then I'm ready to turn over the reins.
Yeah, Jamesetta, you picked up on something that I was thinking about in a kind of a mixed way. I do know that our culture does not put as much value on the elders. There are many cultures that do, particularly in other parts of the world where there's a great reverence given to the elders and the idea of the wisdom that they've learned and their experiences, and that's put a premium on that. And therefore you do have, councils of elders who are actually guiding. Now, it's a council oftentimes, so even as a kind of a check and balance among that council. But I'm thinking of it in terms of, in my own tradition, in our diocese here in Louisville, our practice is that ordinarily you retire at 70. So it's stated, and exceptions are made. Sometimes health issues come along, you retire earlier than that. Sometimes your health is doing well, and the congregation you're serving is matching up well, and you can stay on, on a year-to-year basis. But there is a recognition, I think most of us have, that a pastor of a large congregation, once you start getting beyond 70, your own stamina, your own ability to even sometimes keep up with a lot of the newer trends, the newer things, there's a wisdom wisdom comes with stepping aside. So it's just trying to keeping that in balance. And again, as alluded that, what this allows Mitt to step out, with grace and on top, as opposed to being, in a sense, oh, that poor guy should have gone, a while ago.
Mhm.
But it is something going on in our congregations, as well.
Mhm.
Isn't there something in theater called always an entrance and never an exit? And aren't you known more for your exits than your entrances? Has nobody ever heard that expression before? Okay, just me.
Never heard it, but it makes sense.
It does make sense because you will be known for your exit. And at this stage in my life, I'm come up with the theory that this is the beginning of the rest of my life. And it's totally different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And so I'm trying to make that move forward so that I can make somewhat of a decent exit, but I don't see that in a negative way. I see that in a positive way.
Yeah, I've heard the language even talking about the third age is describing that either post-retirement or those senior years. You got your vigor of youth and young adulthood, and then the second age is when you are maturing and in your more what sometimes classically called adult years. But there's still a whole life to live in retirement. There's a whole life to live in your senior years, and that's not a time for shutting down, but rather actually engaging in different ways that you couldn't before, because now you've got a little more flexibility. And you also recognize involving myself in this particular area is no longer one of my gifts. But now I got this area free that I can get involved in and be involved in. And like you were suggesting with Mitt Romney, there's still areas we're going to be involved in to help the future of our nation, but maybe not serving in the actual Congress itself.
Some call it the fourth quarter of your life. And I heard Warren Buffett speak recently, and he said, you should write your obituary now, fill it in, and live up to it.
Oh, that's a good one.
So think about that. All right. Third topic on moral side of the news, a little closer to home, different topic. Next time you start your car, you may not be alone. An internet privacy watchdog has a warning. Your car is tracking you, collecting much more information than it needs. It's unknown how the data is used, and the drivers cannot opt out. Panel, how does this make you feel when you jump in your car?
I want to go Google that.
Would you say it again?
I just said I want to go Google that. Yes. Go ahead, Stan. Yeah.
Almost a little bit comforted, because I know that if I have, God forbid, an accident or a blowout or something like that on some random highway somewhere, that the GPS is going to give my location, and perhaps my life will be saved because of that. And on the other hand, there's the downside of privacy invasion, but there's also a very significant upside to it that could be life-saving.
The car is not the only place that's happening, and the same is true with our phones as well. Because I've heard recently a number of crimes have been solved because they trace somebody's phone, because of the phone usage. Right. So they know what part of the area you were in at a given time because your phone was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is going on multiple levels at that, and as some of it I appreciate that, like if there's an accident like that. Now, if it's tracking my choice, say between White Castle, McDonald's, Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, I mean, if it's charting all my stops all the time, and therefore it's going to start marketing to me because it notices I stop at this one place a little bit more than this place. But then how do you again regulate that or draw the line? That's that I shop at a particular grocery store more often than this other brand or whatever it might be.
I mean, the reality is we're being tracked all over, just like you said. I mean, I think in terms of, many of us have Ring cameras and we're being tracked that way. We can track what our neighbors are doing. and the amount of traction that they have. We're being tracked on our phones. We're being tracked every time we turn the TV on, and we're watching one of the premium channels or whatever. And so I don't know that it's something that we can get away from, but I do stand like you appreciate having it in my car, because I did have an accident about 2 months ago, and it immediately contacted not only the law enforcement, but contacted the dealership, so that I was not stranded in the middle of nowhere. And so there are some valuable things that come as a result of that. And that's just one of those, I think, sacrifices that we make for modern technology.
All right.
There is that.
Go ahead, Sally.
There is that privacy issue that I think is important. How much do they need to know about me? And if they're going to tell me when I get in the car where I'm going and how much distance that is, then that's a little annoying sometimes. There used to be, Stan, the old TV show called Person of Interest. And I don't know if anybody watched that or not, but I thought that was always a rather curious kind of show, because there were cameras everywhere, and how to avoid being tracked on the street or wherever you were. I know it comes very handy if you've committed a crime, but on the other hand, do you need to know where I am at all times in all places? Perhaps not.
Well, how many of us can use GPS to get us from one place to another?
Right.
And it's tracking that.
Right.
We're talking Google Maps. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. But there is a sense in which I don't know how much of a memory that happens, but I do know, like, when I'm trying to go to my computer here in advance of leaving somewhere, just to double check what's going to be the best route to get there. If I'm repeating going to some place, by the time I put the first, second, or third digit in, even before I go to the street, it's already kicking up. Mm-hmm. So it's got that kind of a memory. It knows where I've been, and then I'm probably going there again.
Right.
And that's just, here on my computer that I'm using right now to talk to you all. That computer knows that about my history already.
Yeah.
And that's what led you here to Moral Side of the News today, I think.
Yes.
Jamesetta, one comment about Ring doorbells. I'm tired about the missing cats and dogs that come on my Ring doorbell feed. Has anybody seen this dog?
Yeah, that's irritating.
But it's very helpful. I agree. All right. A fourth topic. We've got about 5 minutes left on Moral Side of the News. A little more serious topic here. More than 50 years since the last American soldier left Vietnam, President Biden traveled to Hanoi to sign an agreement that brings the former enemies closer than ever. It's an attempt by Washington to counter China's influence in Asia. Dell, Google, Microsoft, and Apple have all shifted parts of their supply chain now to Vietnam. Panel, we're all of a certain age. Jamesetta made reference to that earlier. We all have vivid images of the Vietnam War. How do you feel about this?
I think the world moves on. And if we can make relationships with our people who are our enemies, so much the better. Last week, I watched a wonderful program on PBS. It was a 5-part series called Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland. And it was about the Troubles from both perspectives. I recommend it highly. And I watched it because I have been told that with the way the Troubles were resolved, it shows a light that conflicts like the Israeli-Palestinian issues could also be resolved. So I think what President Biden did was a very good thing.
Yeah, similarly, I'll echo that. I think, look again how we responded after the Second World War, both in our care for Japan and our care for Germany. And by once again giving an experience of us different than what their propaganda was saying about us, but also a chance for us to do it on a very personal level. It wasn't just business relationships. It was a lot of also outreach to human needs in those countries at that time. And similarly, my experience of people who are recently from Vietnam, we're receiving a number of seminarians studying to become priests who are coming to our area from that particular country because the schooling there is not yet able to handle the numbers there. And it's amazing their commitment to growing and learning and learning from us and with us, and we learning with them as well. So I see I'm very optimistic about what the potential for this kind of a growing relationship might be for both.
I'd like to get Father. Oh, I'm sorry, Sally.
That's okay. I was going to say I'm also pleased that President Biden did this, but the image that I get is participating in a funeral one time when he was a soldier in Vietnam, and he came to the funeral home. He sobbed. He just absolutely sobbed at this death of a soldier that he didn't know. We have so much to get over still from the Vietnam War, especially with our military. And that image comes to mind. But I think that the people who have settled in the United States hopefully are happy here and that things have gone well.
I'd like to hear Father Tran's perspective on this. Who's also a member of our larger panel.
Right. Okay, panel, we have 2 minutes left. I have one more topic to squeeze in here. 47-year-old NASA astronaut Frank Rubio has broken the record for the longest space mission in U.S. history. He's been aboard the International Space Station since September of 22. That's more than 355 days. Panel, could you do it? Or do you have any desire for space travel?
I have no desire for space travel, and no, I couldn't do it. To be confined like that, I would be a basket case. That just wouldn't work for me.
Got about a minute left. Anybody else?
No, I wouldn't want to do it either. It just doesn't sound appealing. Not even just an up and back flight, let alone for days or a year at a time.
I'm totally in Jamesetta's corner on this one, totally and completely.
Well, I'm adventuresome enough that I wouldn't want to do it for that length of time, but I would enjoy the experience. I think it's something different. I've always been one to go for something I've never done before. And I'm not sure there's an age issue, but but I would be open to that adventure, going up and coming down and staying for a week or two. Yes, I'd be open to that myself.
All right, a great way to end that, because Bill, I would go with you as well on this. So thank you, panel, to Jamesetta Ferguson, Sally McClain, Stan Miles, and Bill Hammer. Thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Moral Side of the News. We'll have an all-new conversation next week. Thank you, panel.